I worked 6 years of night shifts to pay my student loans and still took the bus to work. So imagine how it felt when I found out my sister used my name to buy herself a new Jeep. My name is Grace Holloway. I'm 32 years old. And last Saturday at my uncle's lakeside birthday party, my world crumbled right in front of 40 people, complete with balloons, ribs, and a damn jazz band. I didn't see it coming. I thought I was just grabbing a slice of cake and finding a spot in the shade. But then my Aunt Marilyn, who everyone sees as the heart of the family, stood up in her bright yellow sundress, raised a glass, and said in her loudest toast voice, "Let's all give a round of applause to Grace for finally paying off that $19,000 Jeep. It's not easy, but she did it all on her own. We are so proud of you." Everyone clapped. People turned to me smiling, nodding, patting my back. The problem: I don't own a Jeep. I haven't owned any vehicle for almost 7 months since my used Toyota Corolla finally gave up on me in a Walgreens parking lot and refused to ever start again. And I sure as hell hadn't paid off any $19,000 loan. My stomach dropped. My hands started shaking and I forced a tight smile while mentally flipping through every possible explanation. Was there another Grace in the family? Was this some weird prank? Or worse, had I lost my damn memory? That's when I saw her, walking up the slope from the parking lot wearing sunglasses way too expensive for someone with credit challenges, came my little sister Dana. Dana, the golden child. Dana, the one who's always been too charming for her own good. Dana, who somehow always lands on her feet, no matter how bad she messes up. And dangling from her perfectly polished fingers, Jeep car keys, with the dealership tag still attached. The crowd shifted as if they too felt something weird beginning to settle in the air. A few people clapped again, this time slower, more confused. Dana smiled wide, waved, and said, "I'm so sorry I'm late. You would not believe the paperwork they make you sign for a new car." She jingled the keys. I blinked. My Aunt Marilyn frowned. My cousin Joel dropped his rib. And for the first time in my adult life, I saw a live realization hit a family gathering like lightning in an open field. The clapping stopped. The smiles froze. I looked directly at Dana, who paused just slightly too long before she spoke again, now addressing me with a tone too sweet to trust. "I mean, it is your Jeep technically." I could barely breathe. "Excuse me," I asked. She took a few steps closer. Aunt Marilyn must have just gotten the names mixed up. But my aunt didn't look confused. She looked terrified. Her eyes darted from me to Dana and back again. Her voice barely above a whisper, she said, "The dealership sent me the loan paperwork last week. Grace, it was your name on it." I swear I felt the ground shift under me. You know that moment when your brain wants to run away before your body can move? That feeling that your stomach's been replaced by ice water. That was me, right there, in flip-flops, holding a plastic fork, at a party I had helped set up, after working a 12-hour hospital shift. And I knew right there and then that something had gone horribly, disgustingly wrong. But to understand how we got to that moment, you need to know a few things about my family, about me, about Dana, and why that gift toast felt more like a sucker punch to the gut. Dana always knew how to work a room. Ever since we were kids, she had this effortless way of pulling people toward her like gravity. She didn't just walk into spaces, she entered like a movie star, making her grand appearance. And Saturday's lakeside party, she played it to perfection. After her big entrance with the jingling keys and all, she slipped her arm around Aunt Marilyn's shoulder like nothing was wrong. "You said it yourself." Dana laughed lightly. "Grace deserves a celebration." Everyone was still frozen, except her. And then she looked at me just for a second. Not long. Just long enough to know she knew exactly what she'd done. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat was tight and my chest was burning. Someone handed me a napkin. I think it was my cousin Tyler. He mumbled something like, "That was weird," and stepped back. Dana didn't seem fazed. She went straight to the buffet table, made a plate, and started chatting with my uncle about how rough dealerships can be on Saturdays. like it was just another casual day, like nothing had exploded. But I watched her fingers. They were trembling. Just barely. That's when the first questions started trickling in. Aunt Marilyn leaned in, whispering, "Grace, are you okay? That was your car, right? You bought a Jeep?" "No," I replied, my voice flat. "I didn't." She blinked. "But the dealership paperwork." "I didn't buy a car, Marilyn. I was already moving. Fast. Past the cornhole boards, past the cooler where two of my cousins were pretending they weren't eavesdropping. I needed air. Or answers. Or both." Dana was sitting under the pop-up canopy with a paper plate of baked beans and ribs when I approached her. "Whose name is on that loan?" I asked. Her fork paused midair. "Grace, let's not make a scene." "Whose name?" She looked up at me. "Technically yours. You know that sound when a balloon pops in a quiet room? That's what it felt like inside my chest." "I needed a car," she said quickly, defensively. "And my credit's garbage, okay? I missed some payments on my Chase card last year and the dealership wouldn't approve me. But you have great credit and you used my name," I said, my voice shaking. "You took out a $19,000 loan using my identity." She lowered her voice. "It's not like that. I was going to make all the payments. You weren't supposed to find out. I just needed help. You stole from me," I snapped. Heads were turning now. Conversations around the party dimmed like someone had turned the volume knob down. Dana's expression changed. Less defensive. More desperate. "I didn't think it'd be a big deal. I knew you'd never qualify for a new car right now anyway. And I am making the payments. I figured I'd refinance in my own name after a few months, and you'd never even know." I stared at her. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was identity theft. Fraud. And it wasn't even the first time she'd walked all over me. She had a history of borrowing my things, clothes, headphones, even once my tax return mail. But this was a whole different category. "You don't get to decide what's a big deal to me," I said coldly. Dana's face flushed, and for the first time I saw a flicker of realization. Maybe she didn't expect me to react this way. Maybe she thought I'd roll over like I always had. But not this time. I turned and walked straight into the cabin, grabbed my phone, and pulled up my credit report. And that's when the pit in my stomach opened wide. There it was, clear as day. Jeep auto loan opened 32 days ago. Amount $19,475. Monthly payment $381.79. Status active. In Grace Holloway's name. I sat down at the edge of the porch, my legs giving out underneath me. I wasn't just humiliated. I was violated. Growing up, people always said Dana and I were so lucky to have each other. Two sisters, close in age, shared bedrooms, birthdays that were just a month apart. But what they didn't see, what they never saw, was how different our lives actually were. I was the reliable one. The boring one. The kid who cleaned up after Dana's messes, who stayed in on Friday nights to help Mom reorganize the pantry, who got her driver's license late because she was too busy babysitting her cousins for gas money. Dana, she sparkled. She was the kind of girl teachers bent the rules for. She cried her way out of speeding tickets, got into a state college despite average grades, and a suspiciously last-minute essay that I later found in one of my old Google Docs folders. And still somehow I kept forgiving her, over and over. But this time it was different. This wasn't just about a paper or a pair of earrings that mysteriously vanished from my jewelry box. This was my name, my credit, my entire financial identity. And she'd used it like it was nothing more than a library card she'd borrowed and forgotten to return. After pulling up my credit report on the porch, I sat there for a long moment, blinking at the screen. That Jeep loan was only the tip of the iceberg. 2 new credit cards had been opened in the past 90 days, both nearly maxed out. A personal loan for $5,000 was listed under home furnishing expenses. And worst of all, a hard inquiry from a payday loan company that I'd never even heard of. All in all, I was staring at nearly $30,000 in active debt. Debt I didn't create. And still some part of me kept whispering, there must be a mistake. This can't be real. But deep down I knew. I knew the way Dana had asked for my social once, pretending it was for a background check for a job application. I remembered the time last year she asked to use my laptop because hers was dead, and I left her alone with it while I went to shower. I remembered the week she crashed at my place after a breakup and sorted through my mail while I was at work. I had given her the pieces slowly, unknowingly, and she had put them together into a perfect lie. I walked back toward the edge of the party where most people were now pretending not to be listening. Aunt Marilyn's jazz band had stopped playing altogether. I saw my mom whispering to my dad, her expression pale and tight. My uncle looked downright furious. Dana was pacing near the boathouse, phone pressed to her ear. She looked up, saw me, and froze. I approached her slowly, my phone still in hand. "You've opened accounts under my name. You've taken out loans. You've wrecked my credit." She lowered the phone, clearly flustered. I was just trying to fix it. I was going to fix it. When I snapped. When you felt like it. When you got bored of the Jeep. When it was too late for me to get approved for a damn apartment lease." She looked away. "You don't understand. You're right," I cut her off. "I don't. But I'm about to." I turned and walked past her, straight toward my mom. "Where's Aunt Marilyn?" I asked. "She's inside, I think." "Grace? What's going on? I need to use her office." "Grace, wait," Mom started. But I didn't stop. Because at that point I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't even angry. I was done. And I was ready to find out exactly how far Dana had gone. Aunt Marilyn's office was quiet, tucked away behind a set of old French doors and stacked with paperwork from her days as a small-town accountant. I shut the doors behind me, blocking out the low hum of shocked relatives and jazz music that had started again, tentative like the party itself wasn't sure if it should keep going. I sat down at her desk and opened my laptop. Thankfully, I'd already signed up for a credit monitoring service a few years back after a local hospital data breach exposed the information of half the town, including mine. Back then, it felt excessive. Now, it felt like the only lifeline I had. My hands trembled as I logged in. There it was. Grace Holloway, active accounts, 7. I clicked the auto loan first, $19,475 already confirmed. Then the first credit card opened 2 months ago, limit $8,000, balance $7,933. Another one opened just last month, $6,000 limit. Already $5,800 used. A personal loan for $5,000. A buy now, pay later furniture credit line through a company I'd never shopped with. Each line item felt like another slap to the face. I'd been scraping by for years, renting a small one-bedroom apartment, driving an old Corolla until it literally gave up eating boxed mac and cheese because it was all I could afford after student loan payments. And all this time, Dana had been building an empire of luxury on my name. Suddenly, I remembered a weekend trip she'd posted about on Instagram last year, some fancy cabin retreat in the Smokies, complete with spa days and catered dinners. I'd wondered how she could afford it. She'd told me it was comped through work. It wasn't. I clicked on one of the furniture store charges. Delivery address 294 Brighton Avenue, Unit B. That was Dana's apartment. No doubt about it now. I was halfway through pulling up my Experian dispute dashboard when I heard a knock on the office door. It creaked open. Aunt Marilyn peeked in. "Grace, sweetheart, your grandmother's asking for you. She says it's urgent." I looked up. "Is Dana with her?" She hesitated, then nodded. "And your parents? And, well, Harold from the credit union is here too. Apparently Grandma called him." Of course she did. I grabbed my laptop and stood, feeling the kind of resolve that only comes after a betrayal that punches you in the soul. When I stepped into the living room, it was like stepping into a courtroom. My grandmother, Eleanor Holloway, sat in her oversized wingback chair like a judge presiding over something ancient and sacred. Her pearl earrings gleamed in the afternoon light. Her lips were pressed tight. Her cane rested beside her, but her spine was straight as a ruler. To her left, my mom and dad. To her right, Dana, eyes puffy from crying but still wearing that same outfit she probably bought with my card. And beside the fireplace, holding a black folder and wearing a suit that didn't belong in a lakeside party, was Harold Crenshaw, the local credit union's senior advisor and a longtime friend of the family. "Come sit," Grandma said, pointing to the love seat directly across from Dana. I sat. Harold opened the folder. "Grace, your grandmother asked me to look into some recent financial activity flagged by Central County Credit Watch. What I've found is troubling." He handed me a paper. It was a breakdown. Not just the loans and credit cards, but hard inquiries, fraudulent activity dates, email confirmations. And at the bottom, total unauthorized debt, 29,738.21. I set the paper down. Dana couldn't meet my eyes. "Grace," Grandma said softly, her voice shaking just a little. "Is it true Dana took all this in your name?" I didn't answer right away. I simply turned my laptop toward the room and let the numbers speak for themselves. The room went still. Dana sat with her hands clasped in her lap, knuckles, white eyes fixed on the edge of the coffee table. No fake charm this time, no casual deflection or half smile. Just silence. My parents looked stunned. My dad rubbed his temples like he was trying to erase the last 10 minutes from his brain. My mom stared at Dana as if she didn't recognize her own daughter. Grandma leaned back in her chair, eyes closed for a beat, then exhaled slowly through her nose. Harold cleared his throat. "There's more. Grace, your credit score has dropped nearly 90 points in the last 2 months. Any future applications for housing employment with background checks or major loans will likely be denied until this is resolved." I swallowed hard. I'd known it in theory, but hearing it out loud made it feel like a hammer blow. Dana finally spoke, her voice thin. "I was going to fix it. I really was." "No," I said, sharper than I expected. "You were hoping I'd never find out. Let's get that part straight." She flinched. "I've worked night shifts for 6 years," I continued. "Skipped birthdays, said no to vacations, watched every dollar. While you've been buying furniture, booking weekend getaways, and driving around in a new Jeep I'm apparently responsible for. And now I can't even apply for a basic lease without red flags." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry," I laughed, cold hollow. "You used my name, my identity. You faked signatures. You opened cards. You hijacked my life. You didn't just steal money, Dana. You stole trust." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were glassy, rimmed with red, but there was something else in them too, resentment. "You always had everything together," she muttered. "Good job. Good credit. Everyone in the family talks about how responsible you are, how Grace always handles things. Well, maybe I just wanted a break. Just once." I blinked. "You wanted a break, so you blew up my life. It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said, voice cracking. "It started with just one card. That graduation gift from Grandma. You never even noticed it went missing. I told myself I'd pay it back. Then things snowballed. I felt like the floor dropped beneath me. Wait, what graduation gift?" Grandma sat forward, suddenly, eyes narrowing. "I gave each of you girls $15,000 when you graduated. Dana, don't tell me." "She forged the deposit," Harold interrupted grimly. "The bank has a copy of the check. It was deposited under Grace's name. But the signature isn't a match. It's clearly traced." Grandma's hand flew to her mouth. "You forged your sister's name on a cashier's check." Dana didn't reply. My mom finally broke her silence. "Dana, is this true?" Dana nodded slowly. "I thought she wouldn't need it," she murmured. "She had that job lined up at the hospital. I had bills. Credit cards. I was drowning." "So you decided to drown me instead?" I asked, voice soft, almost numb. Silence. Harold gathered a few more papers. "Grace, I can help you initiate fraud claims with the credit bureaus. We'll begin the identity theft recovery process. But you'll need to file a police report. That's standard protocol." My chest tightened. Dana looked up, panic flashing in her eyes. "You wouldn't file charges? Would you?" That question hit harder than any number. Because in that moment I realized she wasn't asking. Because she regretted what she'd done, she was scared of the consequences. That was all. And as I sat there weighing the full scope of the betrayal, something inside me shifted. I'd spent years protecting Dana, explaining away her messes, absorbing the fallout. But this wasn't just a mess. This was a crime. And I finally understood that this time, she needed to deal with the consequences, even if they came in handcuffs. I didn't answer Dana right away. Her question, "You wouldn't file charges, would you?" hung in the air like a thick fog no one wanted to walk through. All eyes were on me, but for the first time I wasn't going to answer based on what people expected. Not based on guilt or appearances or some twisted sense of sisterly duty. I was going to answer based on what I needed. So I stood up. "I need some air." I grabbed my phone and walked out of the house down the stone path toward the edge of the lake. The breeze off the water was warm, but it cut through the storm in my head just enough to keep me from spiraling. The sun was starting to set, casting orange streaks across the lake. Everything looked peaceful. It was almost cruel. I sat down on a bench and opened the Notes app on my phone. I started typing, no filter, no plan, just raw facts. Knee $9,000 auto loan, $13,700 credit cards, $5,000 personal loan, forged cashier's check for $15,000, 5 inquiries on credit report, credit score dropped by 90 points, delinquent payments that weren't mine, Dana's confession in front of 4 witnesses. I stared at the list. Then at the bottom, I typed one more line. And she still asked me not to press charges. My thumb hovered over the screen. My heart thudded in my ears. I didn't know what to do. On the one hand, I didn't want to be the person who sent her own sister to jail. But on the other, what would that make me if I didn't? Someone complicit. Someone easy to take advantage of. Someone who never stood up for herself. I didn't want to be that woman anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica, my cousin, and a corporate attorney in Phoenix. Heard about what happened. "I'm flying in tonight. You need someone who's not emotionally compromised in your corner." I felt a strange warmth rise in my chest. Gratitude. Relief. I typed back, "Please, I don't even know where to start." She replied instantly, "Start with securing your credit. Freeze all 3 bureaus. Change passwords. Pull full reports from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Then, if you want to pursue legal action, I can walk you through every step. No pressure. Your call." I spent the next hour at the lakeside bench, phone glowing in the dimming light, locking down my financial identity like I was fortifying a house under siege. Credit freezes, password resets, 2-factor authentication, fraud alerts. I created a Google spreadsheet titled Recovery Plan. I listed every debt Dana had taken, labeled which ones were eligible for dispute, created columns for status dispute, date, resolution, timeline. By the time I looked up, the sun had disappeared behind the trees, and something had shifted inside me. Not rage, not even grief. Clarity. When I finally walked back toward the house, the air felt different. I re-entered the living room where the family had gathered again. My dad stood when he saw me, his face drawn and tired. My mom looked like she'd aged 5 years in the last hour. Jessica had arrived. She was in a fitted navy blazer, hair in a tight bun, and a folder already open on the dining table. "Hey, Grace," she said calmly. "Ready to talk options?" I nodded. Dana sat in the corner of the room, arms crossed, mascara smudged. She didn't look up this time. Jessica gestured to the chair next to her. "Let's map out your rights," she said, flipping the folder open. And just like that, I began reclaiming everything Dana tried to take from me, one documented step at a time. Jessica didn't waste any time. She opened her folder and pulled out a printed list of bullet points, each one meticulously highlighted and annotated. I drafted a basic outline for how we can proceed. First, we gather and organize all documentation. You've already done a lot of that. Second, we file formal disputes with all 3 credit bureaus. Third, we prepare a police report if you choose to go that route. She paused, glancing at me gently. "Grace, I want to be clear. This is your decision. No one's pressuring you to take legal action. But without a police report, undoing all this damage will be slower, and some lenders may refuse to clear the accounts." I took a deep breath and nodded. "Keep going." Jessica continued. The good news is that you have a witness-supported confession. Dana admitted to the fraud in front of multiple people. That strengthens your case. We'll get notarized statements from everyone who heard it, Grandma Harold, your parents. Across the room, Dana let out a faint snort. What are you going to parade me into court now? Make me wear an orange jumpsuit? Jessica didn't even look up. If that's what it takes. I stared at my sister. 6 years ago, I helped her move into her first apartment, paid for her groceries for a month after she lost her retail job, let her borrow my Netflix login, covered her last-minute vet bill when her dog swallowed a bottle cap. Now she was sitting across the room mocking the idea of facing the consequences. I can't believe you're acting like you're the victim, I said slowly. You didn't just screw up once. You spent years building this mess. Dana's expression hardened. You always think you're better than me. I blinked. What? You walk around like you're so put together. Grace, the responsible one. Grace, the good one. You think that makes you more deserving of not being robbed, I shot back. Yeah, I do. Jessica put a hand on my arm to steady me. Let's focus, she said gently. We continued reviewing the documents, account numbers, transaction dates, correspondence with banks. My grandmother entered quietly with mugs of tea and placed one in front of me. I've been going over my own records, she said softly. And there's more. My stomach clenched. More. Grandma pulled out a smaller envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a copy of a wire transfer she'd initiated last year, $8,000 sent to Grace Holloway for what she thought was a home down payment gift. Only I'd never received it. I thought you used it already, she whispered. I never followed up. I didn't want to pry. Jessica examined the document, then nodded. Same forged routing info. This was Dana. 8,000 more, I muttered. My jaw tightened. This just keeps going, doesn't it? Grandma looked devastated. I didn't want to believe it. But it's clear now. She's been doing this to you for years. Dana stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like I'm some monster. I was going to pay it back. When I interrupted. When you finished spending it all. When my credit was too damaged for it to matter. When I couldn't rent a home or get a loan. She didn't answer. Jessica's tone dropped low, steady. Dana, you can either cooperate with us, fully sign a restitution agreement, hand over everything, and begin making amends, or Grace files criminal charges. That's the deal. For the first time all evening, Dana looked scared. But I wasn't going to let fear decide how this ended, not hers and not mine. I looked at Jessica. I want the agreement drafted. I want it legally binding, and I want to get my life back. Dana slumped into the couch like all the fight had left her body. For once, she didn't have an escape plan. And for the first time in my life, I did. Jessica wasted no time. She pulled out her laptop and began typing up a formal restitution agreement, her fingers moving fast, eyes laser-focused. The sound of keys clicking echoed through the room like a gavel striking wood. Dana sat hunched on the far end of the couch, eyes red, jaw clenched. She hadn't said a word since I made it clear this wasn't going to quietly disappear. My parents were quiet, too stiff with disbelief. They looked torn, caught between the daughter they thought they raised and the woman who sat in front of them, now exposed in full daylight. No more excuses. No more shielding. Jessica's voice cut through the tension. The agreement will outline every fraudulent charge, credit line, loan, and wire transfer Dana opened using Grace's name. She'll agree to repay the full amount, $53,000 by my current estimate, in structured monthly payments over 5 years. Grandma chimed in, her voice steady but tight. I've decided to co-sign the first installment and cover the legal filing fees. Grace shouldn't have to wait for justice just because her sister isn't ready to face it. Dana looked up surprised. Wait, you're paying for the lawyer? No, Grandma replied, her tone cool. I'm paying for Grace's peace of mind. Jessica kept typing. She will also relinquish the Jeep immediately. Grace can decide to return it to the dealership or sell it. Either way, it's no longer Dana's vehicle. Dana flinched. I stood there silently watching it all unfold, a strange mixture of relief and fury boiling inside me. I didn't want a Jeep. I didn't want Dana's guilt money. What I needed was to restore what she had taken without asking my dignity, my control, my sense of safety. Jessica turned the laptop toward me. Read this carefully. It includes a full written confession notarizable that can be submitted as evidence if you decide to press charges. I scanned it. The words were brutal in black and white. I, Dana Holloway, acknowledge that I committed identity theft and financial fraud against my sister Grace Holloway. Each line felt like a blow, and yet it also felt like closure finally shaping itself into something tangible, something legal, something that couldn't be brushed off as just family business. Jessica looked at Dana. You need to read and sign this in front of a notary. If you refuse, we file immediately. Dana's voice was small. Will it keep me out of jail? No promises, Jessica said without flinching. But cooperation helps. Right now, that's all you've got going for you. Dana stared at the screen. For a long time, she didn't move. Then slowly she nodded. Fine, she whispered. I'll sign. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Grandma stood and walked over to me. She pressed something into my hand. It was a key. To the guest house on my property, she said softly. I want you to move in just for now. Get your feet under you again. Rent-free. I've already called the property manager to clean it out. I stared at the key, stunned. Are you serious? She nodded. You've been alone in this for too long. Not anymore. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. Not here. Not now. Jessica closed the laptop and stood. We'll get this notarized in the morning. Grace. I'll file the disputes and assist with the police report if needed. You have options now. Power. And a paper trail. My parents still hadn't said much. Finally, my mom stepped forward. I'm so sorry, she said, voice shaking. We should have seen it. We should have. I nodded, not ready to respond. Forgiveness would take time. Trust maybe longer. But for the first time in this whole mess, I had something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. And I wasn't giving it up again. The next morning felt eerily calm, like the eye of the storm had passed, but I wasn't entirely sure if another wave was coming. Jessica picked me up around 8:30 in her rental car. I had the signed confession, the printed restitution agreement, and a small file of supporting documents tucked into a folder on my lap. Dana would meet us at the notary's office in town. She had no choice now. As we drove through the quiet suburban streets, Jessica kept her eyes on the road. You slept. 4 hours, I replied. Better than none. She nodded. After we notarize everything, you'll have the option to submit it directly to creditors. Most will accept it as grounds for account closure and credit restoration. But again, filing a police report will speed things up. I sighed. That question again, the one I'd dodged a dozen times over the last 24 hours. Was I ready to press charges? We pulled into the small office building where the notary was located. Dana's car, a faded red sedan, not the Jeep, was already parked out front. Her head was bowed as she sat in the driver's seat staring at her hands. Inside, the process was swift and procedural. Dana read the agreement silently. Jessica watched like a hawk. The notary, a graying man in a striped tie, asked the standard questions, confirmed her ID, then stamped the final page with a loud thud. And just like that, the confession was official. Dana stood to leave without a word. Wait, I said, stopping her at the door. We're not done. She turned wary. What else do you want? I held up a small envelope. The Jeep keys, the spare, and the parking permit. Dana froze. Her eyes flicked to Jessica, then back to me. Slowly, she reached into her purse and handed them over. She didn't say thank you, or sorry. Just walked out the door like she couldn't get away fast enough. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Jessica whispered, You did it. I looked at the folder in my hand, signed, sealed, and stamped, and I finally exhaled. We stopped by the credit union next to freeze all affected accounts. Harold was already expecting us and guided me through setting up a new identity verification protocol, closing anything with legacy access, and opening a fresh checking account. Each step felt like reclaiming something that was mine. Later that afternoon, we drove to Grandma's property, specifically the guest house tucked behind the main home. I hadn't seen it in years. A cozy little one-bedroom cottage with a stone walkway, a front porch swing, and enough sunlight streaming through the windows to make it feel like a new beginning. Grandma met us there with a box of kitchen basics and a giant bag of toiletries. "I figured you wouldn't want to go back to your apartment tonight," she said softly. "Too many memories tied to everything." She was right. Moving here, even temporarily, felt like breathing clean air again. We made coffee and sat on the porch. Jessica eventually headed back to her hotel, leaving me alone with Grandma. She looked at me carefully. "You've changed," she said. I smiled faintly. "That's what betrayal does, I guess." "No," she corrected. "That's what standing up for yourself does." She handed me another envelope, this time a bank document. It was a deed transfer. "To the guest house?" I asked. "No," she said with a small smile. "To the lake house." Harold helped with the paperwork. "It's yours now." I blinked. "Grandma, that's—" "I know what it is," she interrupted. "It's my way of saying I see you now. Really see you. Not the helper, not the fixer, not the one who always carries the burden. Just Grace. The woman who didn't break when she had every right to." I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about being seen, about being valued, about knowing I'd never let anyone take that from me again. It's a strange feeling holding the deed to a place you once thought was off limits to you. The lake house had always felt like Dana's playground. Family vacations, bonfires, summer photos by the dock. She was always front and center in those memories. Me, I was usually behind the camera or in the kitchen or not invited at all. Now I held the keys to it, and for once, no one could take that away from me. I spent the next week getting my life in order. Jessica returned to Phoenix, but we stayed in touch daily. She helped me finalize dispute letters to all the creditors and oversaw their delivery. With the notarized confession attached, most began reversing the charges almost immediately. One company even called me to apologize for sending debt collection notices to the wrong person. I had to stop myself from laughing. My credit score wasn't healed yet, but it was starting to rise. I kept the spreadsheet updated every morning like it was sacred. Each reversed charge felt like pulling a nail from a board someone had tried to bury me under. And I did it all while sipping coffee on the lake house porch, wrapped in a sweater, watching the water turn gold under the rising sun. It wasn't just about fixing numbers anymore. It was about building my life on my own terms. One afternoon, about 10 days after the notarization, my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. "Family dinner, just us. Sunday night. Grandma's house. Hope you'll come." I stared at the screen. I hadn't seen Dana since the day she signed the papers. Was I ready? A few minutes later, another message came in from Grandma. "No expectations, but if you do come, I want you to walk in, knowing that nothing is the same, and that's a good thing." I said yes. I didn't know why, maybe to see it through. Maybe because a part of me wanted to believe that not everything in my family was broken beyond repair. Sunday came. I parked outside Grandma's place in my newly titled car, mine paid for from the sale of the Jeep Dana had surrendered. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't new. But it was mine down to the registration. I walked in with a bottle of sparkling cider and my head held high. The room went quiet for a second when I entered. Then Grandma stood, walked over and hugged me tighter than she had in years. "You look strong," she said. "I am." My mom wiped her eyes discreetly from across the room. My dad nodded solemnly. Even Harold was there, sitting by the fire with a glass of tea, acting like it was just another Sunday. And then I saw Dana. She was seated in the corner in jeans and a hoodie, not her usual curated look. Her face was bare, no makeup. Her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She looked up at me, unsure. "Hi," she said softly. I gave a nod. "Hi." That was it. No hug, no gushing, but I didn't turn away either. As we all sat down for dinner, conversation flowed slowly, like people learning to speak again after a long silence. My mom told a story about her students. Dad complained about city traffic. Grandma made her famous lemon rosemary chicken, and I noticed Dana only picked at her food. At one point, she cleared her throat. I've been seeing a therapist. Everyone paused. I thought it was just about impulse control, she said. But it's more than that. I didn't realize how far I'd gone. How much I hurt you. The room stayed quiet. I let the silence stretch before I finally responded. I'm glad you're getting help, I said. She looked up at me surprised. But therapy doesn't erase what happened, I added. Trust takes time. Dana nodded. I know. I want to try. To be someone worth trusting again. There was nothing dramatic about it. No tearful reunion. No dramatic music swelling in the background. Just honesty. And that for now was enough. The days after that dinner felt quieter, more settled. Like a wound finally starting to scab over. Not healed, not forgotten, but not raw anymore either. Every morning, I woke up at the lake house and made coffee before checking my emails and updating the credit recovery spreadsheet. By then, 4 of the 7 fraudulent accounts had been officially closed. 2 were in pending dispute status, and 1, the personal loan, was being investigated further due to forged documents. I didn't know how long it would take, but for the first time I was okay with waiting. Progress, even slow, was still progress. I started walking by the lake in the evenings, listening to podcasts or nothing at all. Just me, my footsteps, and the ripple of water against the shore. There was something about silence that had always scared me growing up. But now I welcomed it. I needed the stillness to process everything that had happened. One afternoon, as I was setting up my online bill pay in my new bank account, a large deposit notification popped up. $2,000 from Holloway Properties, LLC. It was rental income. From my grandmother's duplex downtown. I'd nearly forgotten, buried under the drama and legal filings, that she'd transferred that property to me, too. The paperwork had cleared days earlier, and now every month I'd be receiving passive income for the first time in my life. It felt surreal. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was excited about the money, though, of course that helped, but because this meant freedom, flexibility, room to finally breathe. That same afternoon, I got a text from my manager at the hospital. Just checking in. Any update on when you'll be ready to return? I'd taken a short leave to handle the crisis. They'd been supportive but understandably anxious for a response. I thought about it for a few minutes, then picked up the phone. Hey, I said when she answered. I'd like to return next Monday, but today's shifts only. There was a pause on the other end. You're giving up the night shift pay bump. Yeah, I said, it's time. And I meant it. For years, I'd worked nights because the extra few dollars an hour helped me stay ahead of my loans. I'd sacrificed sleep health and any semblance of a social life just to scrape by. But now, with the passive income from the duplex, I didn't have to do that anymore. Now I could live, not just survive. Later that evening, I invited Jessica over. We sat on the porch wrapped in blankets despite the summer breeze, passing a bottle of wine back and forth. You really went to war, she said, nudging me with her elbow. And you came out with a deed in one hand and a confession in the other. I laughed genuinely. Sounds dramatic when you say it like that. It was dramatic. You should write a book. Maybe a blog post, I joked. Then she asked the question that had been circling my own mind for days. Do you think you'll ever really forgive her? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out at the water glowing with the last light of day. I think I'll always remember, I said slowly. And I think forgiveness will have to grow alongside that memory, side by side. But I'm not letting her actions dictate my peace anymore. Jessica nodded, quiet and approving. We clinked glasses. To closure. To recovery. To me finally choosing myself. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt okay. Not perfect. Not unbroken. But okay. The lake house slowly became my sanctuary. I painted the kitchen cabinets pale blue, hung up thrifted curtains, and added a cozy rug near the front door. Each change made the space feel more like mine, not a hand-me-down or a borrowed favor, but a life I was curating on my own terms. I also set boundaries. That was new for me. My parents called often. At first, they wanted daily updates on the house, my finances, even on Dana. I learned to say, I'm not ready to talk about that, and end the call kindly but firmly. They eventually adjusted. My mom even texted one morning proud of how you're standing your ground. I'm learning from you. It meant more than I expected. Dana, on the other hand, was mostly silent. She sent the first repayment $100 through a scheduled transfer from her new job. She also emailed a scanned copy of a typed apology letter addressed to my sister, but it read more like a formality than anything heartfelt. Still, it was a start. What I didn't expect, though, was how the wider family reacted. Some of them praised me. Uncle Ben sent flowers. Aunt Lisa wrote a card that said, "You're braver than I ever was." Cousin Mallory messaged on Facebook admitting her own sister had used her credit card years ago, and she never spoke up about it. But not everyone was supportive. One cousin accused me of tearing the family apart. Another posted a vague status about people airing dirty laundry for attention clearly aimed at me. And then there was my Aunt Camille, the family peacekeeper, who called me out of the blue. "You've made your point," she said softly. "Maybe it's time to let it go. Forgive and move on. You know how Dana is." That line hit me sideways. You know how Dana is. Like her behavior was just some quirky personality trait I needed to accept. "No," I replied calmly. "I know who Dana chose to be, and I'm not pretending anymore." Camille sighed. "Grace, this family has always survived because we stay united." I let the silence stretch before answering. "If unity means silence, then maybe we've just been surviving wrong." She didn't respond, and I didn't feel guilty. Because for the first time, I wasn't folding to guilt. I was choosing truth. Later that week, I got a call from my hospital's HR department. They asked if I'd be willing to lead a financial wellness workshop for younger nurses. Apparently, word had gotten around that I'd been through a fraud ordeal and handled it with impressive composure. I laughed at the irony. A few months ago, I'd been terrified of checking my credit score. Now I was being asked to help others protect theirs. I said yes. The workshop was scheduled for the following Thursday. I spent 2 nights preparing notes, slides, examples, even a little timeline of what happened minus the family details. I ended the presentation with one line: "Guard your name like it's your future, because it is." The younger nurses clapped. Some lingered afterward to ask personal questions. One even cried when she admitted her own brother once opened a credit card in her name. "This is the first time I've told anyone," she whispered. I told her what I wished someone had told me: you don't owe anyone your silence, especially not someone who already took your voice. When I left the hospital that day, I didn't just feel strong, I felt whole. It was a new sensation, and one I intended to keep chasing. 1 month later, I stood in the driveway of my apartment building, my former apartment building, with a moving box under each arm. The air was warm and thick with the scent of cut grass and summer rain, and I was waiting for a friend to help load the last few things into my car. A modest Toyota sedan. Reliable. Practical. Completely paid for with cash from the sale of the Jeep and the first month's rent from the duplex. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. And every time I turned the key, it reminded me that I wasn't starting over. I was starting right. As I drove away from that building, the same one I'd cried in front of, worked late night shifts to afford, and paced in while opening denial letters from credit card companies, I didn't look back. I was headed home now, to the lake house, to peace. When I arrived, Grandma was already there waiting with a pie. A literal pie. Cherry with a braided crust and steam curling from the vents like a Norman Rockwell painting. "You didn't have to bake?" I smiled, grabbing the dish from her. She waved a hand. "I didn't. Harold did. Don't tell him I took credit for it." We laughed and sat on the porch. The lake shimmered in front of us. I'd always admired it as a kid, but somehow I'd never felt welcome enough to claim it as mine. Until now. We talked about everything: her garden, my job, the workshop, the rental property. She asked thoughtful questions. She didn't press for updates on Dana. Until she did. "How's she doing?" she asked gently, not looking at me. I paused. "She's quiet. Pays on time. But I haven't spoken to her in weeks. She hasn't reached out." Grandma nodded slowly. "You don't have to reach back. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation." I appreciated that, because honestly, I didn't know what I wanted with Dana. Some days I thought I missed her, the version of her I grew up with, the one who used to braid my hair and sneak me candy under the dinner table. But most days I just missed a time when I thought I could trust her. Later that evening, I pulled out the manila folder, yes, that same one that held all the old paperwork. I'd kept it not out of fear but as a reminder. A record of everything I'd fought through. I opened it not to revisit the pain, but to celebrate the progress. 4 of the 5 credit card accounts had been closed in my favor. My credit score had bounced back almost 70 points. The fraudulent loan had been officially removed from my record. The 5th account, the lingering furniture loan, was still pending. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the tools, the support, and most importantly, the voice to deal with it. I'd changed all my passwords, enrolled in 2-step authentication, frozen access to new credit without written authorization. I'd gone from victim to advocate. Grandma brought out coffee and we watched the sunset reflect off the lake like molten glass. You know, she said after a long silence, I used to think the most valuable thing I could pass down was property. Money. Tangible things. I looked at her. And now, she smiled. Now I know the most valuable thing I can give is clarity, the ability to tell the difference between loyalty and obligation, between forgiveness and foolishness, between love and harm dressed up in familiar clothing. I felt those words sink into me like warm tea on a cold day. You've earned this peace, Grace, she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Don't let anyone take it from you ever again. I nodded, emotion catching in my throat. And as the sky shifted from orange to purple, I knew something deep in my bones. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of the version where I was finally the author. 2 weeks later, I found myself invited to another family gathering, this time a more casual one. Grandma was hosting a Sunday brunch to reclaim the energy, as she put it, from that disastrous lakeside birthday party. At first I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to be back in the same room with certain relatives, the ones who had said too little too late, or the ones who had accused me of being too harsh. But Grandma promised it would be small, just immediate family. No drama, no speeches. I agreed. I showed up late on purpose, wearing a soft cotton dress and a leather jacket that made me feel like myself. Confident, settled, not someone hiding or apologizing for taking up space. Jessica was already there, sipping coffee and making Grandma laugh. My parents greeted me with long hugs. My mom whispered, "I'm proud of you," like it was still a surprise I'd come out of the storm stronger. And then there she was, Dana, sitting on the patio steps in jeans and a loose sweater, her hair tied back, no makeup. She looked small, not physically, but in the way people do when the weight of consequences finally sinks in. She didn't rush to me. Didn't put on a smile or pretend things were normal. She just stood up slowly and walked over. "Hey," she said. "Thanks for coming." "Hey," I replied. I waited, letting the silence do its work. Dana exhaled. "I'm still in therapy. Still making payments. Still figuring out how to live with who I was." I looked at her. Really looked at her. "And who are you now?" She paused. "Someone who knows better. Who's trying to be better." That line could have sounded performative, but it didn't. Not this time. She wasn't begging for forgiveness or a shortcut. She was simply stating where she stood. And that was enough for now. "I don't know if we'll ever go back to how we were," I said honestly, "but I think I'm okay with that." Dana nodded. "I am too." We stood there in silence for another few seconds before parting ways. No hug. No, "I love you." Just a mutual nod of acknowledgement. It was the most honest moment we'd shared in years. Later, after brunch, Grandma gathered us in the living room and pulled out an old photo album. Not the typical one filled with birthdays and baby pictures. This one was filled with black and white photographs I'd never seen. Her as a child, her parents, her siblings. She pointed to a picture of her own mother. She used to pit us against each other, played favorites. Me and my sister didn't speak for 20 years after she passed. We all listened quietly. I swore I'd never let that happen in my family, but patterns repeat unless we actively break them. She turned the page to a picture of Dana and me as kids sitting on a dock, bare feet dangling over the water. "I'm not proud of the choices I made," Grandma said. "But I am proud of how you both are trying to rise above them." It was the closest she'd come to a public apology, and honestly, it was more powerful than any prepared speech. Before I left, she pulled me aside and handed me a small envelope. "I promise this is the last one," she smiled. Inside was a handwritten letter. To Grace. Not just my granddaughter, but the woman who reminded this family what it means to fight with grace and live with courage. With love always. Grandma. I hugged her. Hard. Because the truth is, the money, the deeds, even the legal documents, they all mattered. But this, being seen, being heard, being respected, that was the real inheritance. Summer faded into early fall, and life finally began to feel steady. It had been 3 months since Dana's confession and the signing of the restitution agreement. The monthly payments came in like clockwork, routed directly into a separate account labeled Recovery, a small detail that gave me a sense of order I hadn't felt in years. The duplex rental continued to bring in stable income. I no longer had to calculate my groceries down to the cent or wonder how I'd cover next month's utilities. For the first time in my adult life, I had savings, a cushion, breathing room. At work, I'd transitioned into a daytime position. The switch came with less pay, sure, but I hadn't felt this energized in years. I finally had regular sleep, more FaceTime with coworkers, and the occasional evening to do nothing, which felt like a luxury in itself. Even my friendships were changing. With the burden of secrecy and shame lifted, I could talk openly. I joined a small book club, started seeing a therapist of my own, and even said yes to a spontaneous hiking trip with some nurses I'd barely spoken to before. Turns out I had more energy for people when I wasn't constantly running on fumes and emotional debt. One crisp Saturday morning, as I walked along the lake trail near my house, I stopped by the bench where everything had changed, where I first discovered the scope of what Dana had done. The leaves around me had started to turn amber and red, and the wind carried the earthy scent of new beginnings. I sat down and pulled out my phone. There was a message from Dana, short, unassuming. "Payment sent. Hope you're doing okay." It wasn't dramatic. It didn't tug at my heartstrings. But it also didn't offend me, because finally we were existing in truth, not illusion. She wasn't pushing for redemption. I wasn't pretending everything was fine. And in that space of quiet, honest distance, I found peace. Later that afternoon, I hosted a few close friends at the lake house. Nothing fancy, just chili on the stove, cider in mugs, and a table full of laughter. Jessica came, of course, carrying a tin of her now famous cornbread and a candle that smelled like forest after rain. "Smells like recovery," she joked as she placed it by the window. We clinked mugs. We talked about everything: books, work, upcoming travel. Not once did the conversation pivot to Dana lawsuits or betrayal. And that felt like another kind of healing. Eventually someone asked, "So what's next for you, Grace?" I paused. For once, I didn't have a rehearsed answer. "I don't know exactly," I said. "But I know this. I'm not building my life around other people's expectations anymore. I'm not shrinking to keep anyone else comfortable. And I'm not apologizing for protecting my peace." They nodded, smiling. Because that's what healing sounds like when you finally claim it. Not loud, not triumphant. Just honest. I used to think strength looked like holding everything together, keeping the peace, absorbing the damage, staying quiet so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But now I know real strength is something quieter, yet more profound. It's choosing yourself. It's drawing a line, not in anger, but in truth. It's saying this far, no further, and meaning it even when it shakes the ground you grew up on. Standing up to a family member doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you finally love yourself enough not to let the cycle continue. I didn't get justice in the way some people expected. I didn't put Dana behind bars. I didn't destroy our family to feel powerful. What I did was harder. I stayed. I faced the betrayal head on. I rebuilt what was mine, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, relationally. I created safety for the version of me that was ignored for too long. The one who worked in silence. The one who gave too much. The one who finally said enough. And if you've been in my shoes or anywhere near them, I hope you know this. Your peace matters. Your name matters. And you deserve a life that is entirely unapologetically yours.